The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
It is the assessment of the United States government that the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf of Oman today. This assessment is based on intelligence, the weapons used, the level of expertise needed to execute the operation, recent similar Iranian attacks on shipping, and the fact that no proxy group operating in the area has the resources and proficiency to act with such a high degree of sophistication.
Everybody, how's that for a change of subject? So that's what happened just a few minutes ago. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there were two tankers that were struck right near the Strait of Hormuz, right at the beginning of the Strait of Hormuz. They were both leaving Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and they came under a suspected attack just as they were getting into the Strait of Hormuz. These two ships caught fire. They were burning. There was some sort of a rescue. You can't reconcile these news stories because, in chaos you can lie, in chaos you can, suppress, in chaos. And of course, when things like this happen, the first thing that goes woo out the window is the truth, right? So you had Mike Pompeo just hours after these two tankers. They were not our tankers, by the way. The one belonged to Norway. And the other one belonged to Japan. Now, they were chartered out to other countries, neither one of them being our country, okay? They were chartered out. One was chartered to Taiwan, and the other one, I believe, was chartered to Japan. And they were carrying oil-related products. I think they were carrying naphtha, which, if you ever strip furniture, that's like the stuff you use to get the top layer of paint or stain off of naphtha, and the other one was carrying methanol. All right, that said, there were these two tankers. And Pompeo is alleging that they were torpedoed and that only Iran could have done it because of the expertise, and offering absolutely no evidence, took no questions today, just accused Iran of doing it while the Ayatollah, believe it or not, was meeting with Shinzo Abe of Japan. Now, why would Iran attack, the Japanese cargo of Shinzo Abe's Japan while meeting with Shinzo Abe, who was there to try and decrease the tensions between the Saudis, the United States, and Iran? Why? Why would they do that? It just doesn't make any sense to anybody who, thinks about it. But I can tell you this little piece of information. The Saudis have an airport in Yemen. Yeah. And they're fighting an Iranian proxy war in Yemen. The Saudis are fighting what they call the Houthi rebels. They're Iranian-backed. Okay, those rebels. Well, just before this incident happened, it was like hours, this happened hours before this attack on these vessels occurred. The Houthi rebels, who are backed by Iran, attacked a Saudi airport in Yemen and wounded 26 people in the arrivals hall. So you have this proxy war going on in Yemen with the Saudis on one side and the Iranians on another side. And the Saudis have an airport in Yemen, and the airport is attacked by the proxies for Iran. Hours later, there's some, and nobody thinks it was a torpedo. look, there's so much, investigation that has to go on. You have to talk to the ship's operators. You have to talk to the sailors that were on board. You have to talk to people who saw something. You have to, and not just Mike Pompeo standing up at the podium saying, here we had a Gulf of Tonkin incident is basically what this is, right? You don't have any evidence being presented to the American people or to any people. You don't have any questions being taken. You don't, and of course the first question would be, well, what did the ship's operators say happened? Did they see a torpedo? What was on their radar? Blah, blah, blah. No, it looks like there was an improvised explosive device, or what they call a limpet mine. Limpet mines they could be very big, they could be very small, and they're like attached to the ship's hull with magnets, okay? And that, we had something similar to this happen a few months ago. And nobody knows who did it, but the United States blamed Iran for it with limpet mines. And all the limpet mines did, they were small ones, and they made holes in 4 vessels. And the United States was very quick to say, Iran did it. Well, we don't know, because America's so incurious, it doesn't even, ask questions. But hey, this is a great subject changer from the fact that Donald Trump is now in the crosshairs of the House of Representatives, and that Hope Hicks is going to testify next Wednesday, yes, behind closed doors, but her testimony will be released to the public shortly after she completes her testimony. Now, I don't know why she's doing it behind closed doors. I just think it's bizarre. If anybody has any patriotism left in their veins, they should be testifying and insisting on testifying in public. Mueller ought to be insisting on testifying in public. Gates, who's just been subpoenaed, ought to be insisting on testifying in public. Flynn, who his loyalty to this country was questioned by his judge, Emmett Sullivan. And Hope Hicks, she ought to be testifying in public. If she had any patriotic, impulses, then she would want to. Why? Because what is Hope Hicks going to be asked about? She's going to be asked about that time when Donald Trump was on Air Force One and dictated to her a fake letter designed to cover up Junior's Trump Tower meeting, which is now the subject of all this crap that Donald Trump told George Stephanopoulos yesterday. Now, he said this before. Again, the media is disappointing. Not fake. I mean, these are his words, but disappointing in that in 2017, Donald Trump also said, after the New York Times was able to show that there were many contacts between the Trump campaign and Russians, because remember, prior to knowing about the Trump Tower meeting, the position of the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, right up until last July, almost a year ago, right, was that there were no contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russian government officials or any Russian official. They were denying all contacts. And then evidence started to come and clearly showed that there was a Trump Tower meeting and that Junior, and there were emails, and it was arranged, and Natalia Veselnitskaya and Rinat Akhmetshin and a whole bunch of people, and the Crocus Group and everything, and it all tied back to Trump's 2013 visit to Moscow, which they didn't want out, but it came out. And so the story then changed. So what? And in 2017, Donald Trump was standing on a stage with the French president. I mean, it's like every year, right? They stand together. And he tried to explain away Junior's now known meeting with Russian operatives. And Natalia Veselnitskaya, all these many months later, we find out, that she was working for the Russian government. Now, of course, if you listen to this show, you knew she was working for the Russian government because I pointed you to the Brazen case. And she was representing Vladimir Putin's position against Bill Browder in court. And that's what she was doing here in the United States in the first place, representing Vlad and Brazen, who ripped off Bill Browder and then ripped off the Russian people.
things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
All right. I'm going to play this for you. This is a year ago, okay? This is 2017 now. Why the media is acting as if Trump never said this crap about, there's nothing wrong with taking Oppo research from a foreign government. I don't know why they're pretending this is new. Something that Donald Trump just said to George Stephanopoulos for the first time, because that isn't the case. The case is that after Trump's entire administration fed a steady diet to the American people about the fact that the lie was there were no contacts between anybody on the Trump campaign and Russians, and that this whole thing was a hoax, it was a fake, that Russia didn't interfere in the election, that the Trump campaign had nothing to do with Russians, never met with Russians, that it was just Jeff Sessions bumping into, the ambassador at various, NRA meetings or at the side of the convention, and that, there was no contacts. There were nothing happened, right? Absolutely nothing. Then they got caught with the Trump Tower meeting, and it became obvious that, and this is where I question Mueller, and this is why Mueller has to appear. It became obvious that there was a Trump Tower meeting, and in that Trump Tower meeting, it wasn't just Junior, okay? Manafort, who is very clear about campaign finance laws, was in that meeting, and Mueller said, because Junior would not talk to Mueller, and we don't know why. We don't know if Junior, invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege. We have no idea because it's redacted, see? So we don't know why Junior refused to talk to Mueller, and we don't know why Donald Trump refused to talk to Mueller, and we don't know why Donald Trump refused to answer any questions about obstruction. But we do know that we were fed a steady diet of lies. And then the New York Times broke the story that there was a Trump Tower meeting, and their position changed. Their position went from there were no contacts to, oh, so what if Junior had a meeting? Now, while you're listening to this, I want you to remember that Donald Trump on Air Force One coming home from Hamburg, Germany, okay, dictated a false and fake letter to Hope Hicks saying that the meeting that Donald Trump Jr. had with Russians was about adoption and had nothing to do with sanctions and had nothing to do with Sergei Magnitsky or the Magnitsky Act or the fact that Natalia Veselnitskaya, who was here, Magnitsky was Bill Browder's attorney. And Magnitsky was the person who uncovered this massive fraud perpetrated by Vladimir Putin on Bill Browder's company. Here, in a nutshell, Bill Browder's company thought that things were going to head south in Russia really fast. And so they started selling everything that they had, these hedge funds, and they were selling everything that they owned in Russia. And they made about $1 billion. But they wanted their money out of Russia, and they decided to sell, to liquidate the whole hedge fund. They made about $1 billion. And so the Russian government, Vladimir Putin, then assessed Bill Browder with a tax bill, and they leveled a $230 million tax against Bill Browder. Well, Bill Browder paid it, but Vladimir Putin stole it from the Treasury, and Sergei Magnitsky uncovered this and exposed it, and therefore he was arrested. He went to the Russian government to try and defend the Russian people, saying, your president just stole $230 million from us. God only knows who else he's stealing from, right? It goes into the Treasury in the form of taxes. And now you want to know how your president is a multi-billionaire many times over. Here's how he's doing it. All right. And so instead of the Russian government arresting Putin or charging Putin with tax fraud or charging Putin with embezzlement, they arrested Sergei Magnitsky, put him in jail, and killed him. Natalia Veselnitskaya was the attorney for Putin in this case. That's why she was in New York. Now, Trump stood on a stage in 2017 with Macron And you know how he does these, I'll take questions now, right? At these, like he did it with the Prime Minister of Poland the other day, right? So it was one of those deals. And this is what he said when he was confronted last year with the fact that Junior met with a Russian agent.
As far as my son is concerned, my son is a wonderful young man. He took a meeting with a Russian lawyer. Not a government lawyer, but a Russian lawyer.
She was a government lawyer.
It was a short meeting. It was a meeting that went very, very quickly, very fast. Two other people in the room, I guess one of them left almost immediately, and the other one was not really focused on the meeting. I do think this. I think from a practical standpoint, most people would have taken that meeting. It's called opposition research, or even research into your opponent. I've had many people, I have only been in politics for 2 years, but I've had many people call up, oh, gee, we have information on this factor or this person or, frankly, Hillary. That's very standard in politics. Politics is not the nicest business in the world, but it's very standard where they have information and you take the information.
That is
in
not
the case
standard.
of Don, he listened. I guess they talked about, as I see it, they talked about adoption and some things. Adoption wasn't even a part of the campaign.
Oh, my God.
But nothing happened from the meeting. Zero happened from the meeting. And honestly, I think the press made a very big deal over something that really a lot of people would do. Now, the lawyer that went to the meeting, I see that she was in the halls of Congress also. Somebody said that her visa or her passport to come into the country was approved by Attorney General Lynch. Now, maybe that's wrong. I just heard that a little while ago, but it's a little surprised to hear that. So she was here because of Lynch. So, again, I have a son who's a great young man. He's a fine person. He took a meeting with a lawyer from Russia. It lasted for a very short period, and nothing came of the meeting. And I think it's a meeting that most people in politics probably would have taken.
All of that is a lie. Every last bit of it. She, of course, is a Russian lawyer. And the overture that they got, that Trump Jr. got, was that the Russian government wanted to help your father. The Russian government wants to help Donald Trump win the presidency. And Donald Trump also had a Trump Tower Moscow deal in play, which we found out much, much later through Michael Cohen, right? The lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, did have a problem getting into this country. And the reason why she was granted a visa is because she was representing the Russian government against Bill Browder in court. It was Preet Bharara's case, okay? That's whose case it was. And he was one of the first prosecutors fired by Donald Trump. Now, Bill Browder is responsible for the Magnitsky Act. What is the Magnitsky Act? It's sanctions. Sanctions on Russia. That's what Flynn was talking to the Russians about, lifting sanctions on Russia. They characterized it as adoption because in retaliation for the Magnitsky Act sanctions that went global against Russia, thanks to Bill Browder, Russia wanted the sanctions lifted and they couldn't. So they threatened Americans like to adopt Russian babies. Why? Because we're beautiful. Can't beat a Russian baby for, a pasty white baby. If you're looking for a pasty white baby, you want a Ukrainian baby, you want a Russian baby. And so they banned the adoption of Russian babies for Americans. This is how they get to adoption, because they were talking about sanctions, right? Right.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, so you heard the 2017, right? You heard that. That was a year ago in France, right? And so now we're going to play you what he said to George Stephanopoulos last night. Now, there's a discussion to be had about why Why is everyone pretending? And by everyone, I mean people who know better. I mean people who are, toil in this arena along with me, right? People who read the news, know the news, have archives of news, have footage, have all these things at their fingertips, okay? Why are we pretending that Donald Trump didn't offer this same stupid explanation that anybody would take opposition research from a foreign government, right? And that he finally admits this is not the first time he said it. Now, there is a difference between 2017 and now. I wonder if anybody has the smarts to figure out what that might be. But here he is yesterday saying the same damn thing that he said in 2017.
And then the report comes out, and they didn't even say, they hardly even talked about it.
Should he have gone to the FBI when he got that email?
Okay, let's put yourself in a position. You're a congressman. Somebody comes up and says, hey, I have information on your opponent. Do you call the FBI? I don't think.
Coming from
I'll tell you what,
you do.
I've seen a lot of things over my life. I don't think in my whole life I've ever called the FBI. In my whole life. You don't call the FBI. You throw somebody out of your office. You do whatever you do.
Al Gore got a stolen briefing book. He called the FBI.
Well, that's different. A stolen briefing book. This isn't a stolen. This is somebody that said, we have information on your opponent. Oh, let me call the FBI. Give me a break. Life doesn't work that way.
The FBI director says that's what should happen.
The FBI director is wrong.
Oh, my
Your
God.
campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen.
What?
There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent.
Norway?
Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it.
Huh.
But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
Okay, that's not the way it is, and it doesn't work like that. And I don't know, Norway? What is he talking Norway for? Why was Norway on his mind? Isn't that interesting that a ship, a Norwegian ship was attacked in the Gulf of Hormuz? I don't know why Norway is always on his mind. But, I guess he's saying he wouldn't accept help from a crap hole country. Norway. All right, here's the difference. Okay, we'll do the 2017-2018 difference right now. The difference is in 2017 when he said this, Mueller was still investigating, and Congress couldn't step on Mueller's toes. And they couldn't call witnesses, and they couldn't call Hope Hicks to testify in public, and they couldn't call Don McGahn to testify in public, and they couldn't, right? They did call them to testify behind closed doors. The Intelligence Committee was in the hands of Devin Nunes. Remember that? We had an election in 2018, and the majority changed, and now we have the Judiciary Committee, and now we have the Intelligence Committee. But remember back in 2017, Nunes had it. And Nunes had decided to issue a report clearing the president of any wrongdoing. And Mueller was still investigating, and the Democrats could not hold a hearing if they wanted to, because the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, all the committee chairs belong to the majority. They would never, ever, ever do it because it was Nunes and Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House. And so there was no chance in 2017. So he got away with lying like that. And there was no way to talk to Hope Hicks. There was no way to talk to Don McGahn. There was no way to talk to, Junior went to the Senate and lied to them. And that's why he had to go yesterday and clear up and clean up his testimony about this Trump Tower meeting. And that's why they want to now talk to Hope Hicks, because she was who Donald Trump Sr. dictated that false letter to. And they want her testimony. So that was the difference between 2017 and 18. The difference between going and meeting with the president of France, or meeting with, the Queen of Norway, or whatever, or the Queen of England, or any of those stupid things that he tweeted this morning. Well, am I supposed to report the meeting with the Queen of England? I meet with her too. Did the Queen of England hack the Democratic National Committee? Did the Queen of England, did Norway hack? See, the difference between what the Russians had and what any other intelligence agency that is cooperating with the United States has, like the Five Eyes group has, is shared intelligence. That is why there was a counterintelligence investigation to begin with. Why? Because the Australian diplomat Alexander Downer called the FBI after George Papadopoulos bragged to him that he had a meeting with a Maltese professor with ties to Russian intelligence, who told him that Russia had hacked into the DNC and the DCCC and had devastating dirt on Hillary Clinton. And so a cooperating ambassador called the FBI. People in Australia knew to call the FBI, and that's how the counterintelligence investigation, which James Comey was in charge of, began. Now, Donald Trump here is saying that if a government comes to him after doing a criminal thing using their military intelligence units to hack into his opponent, to steal voter registration rolls, and that his campaign would then pass polling information back to them, that everybody does it, the man is freaking delusional. And he is creating this chaotic mess inside the intelligence communities, inside the FBI, inside the Department of Homeland Security, inside the counterintelligence, outfits that do cybersecurity and all the rest of it, because they don't know who they can go to with any information about anything being hacked or tapped into, or because the President of the United States, if it benefits him, will investigate them. You know how I always said in chaos you can steal? Welcome. Welcome to the greatest example of creating chaos so you could steal an election. And to change the subject, because this is devastating now that the Democrats are in charge of the House and Mueller is done and they don't have to worry about cross purposes, Donald Trump is about to declare war against Iran. I'm serious.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
If I got a call from somebody saying the Russian government wants to help Lindsey Graham get reelected, they've got dirt on Lindsey Graham's opponent, should I take that meeting?
Well, Senator, I would think you'd want to consult with some good legal advisors before you did that.
So the answer is, should I call the FBI?
I think it would be wise to let the FBI know.
You're going to be the director of the FBI, pal. So here's what I want you to tell every politician. If you get a call from somebody suggesting that a foreign government wants to help you by disparaging your opponent, tell us all to call the FBI.
To the members of this committee, any threat or effort to interfere with our elections from any nation state or any non-state actor is the kind of thing the FBI would want to know.
All right, so I'll take it that we should call you, and that's a great answer.
Oh! Okay, so that was Lindsey Graham then. Okay, here's Lindsey Graham today. This is very sick and twisted. And one has to wonder, is it a goat or a boy?
What are the implications of hearing the President of the United States saying it's okay to accept foreign dirt from about an opponent?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake of law. I don't want to send a signal to encourage this. And I hope my Democrat colleagues will be equally offended by the fact that this actually did happen in 2016, where a foreign agent was paid for by a political party to gather opposition research. All those things are wrong.
Should there be legislation to make it expressly outlawed in this country?
I think it already is. I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm willing to make it clear if we need to.
The president also suggested that you guys, members of Congress, would do the exact same thing by accepting foreign information.
Well, I can only speak for myself. I've never had a government come up to me and say, hey, I'd like to help you in your campaign. The answer is no. It's got to be no. I mean, the likelihood of foreign interference is growing, not lessening. And again, you've got a situation in 2016 that, Don Jr. sat down and talked with somebody representing themselves to have information, and that was a mistake. Apparently, they didn't act on it. It's not a crime to have a meeting. It's a crime to receive the information, and apparently that didn't happen. But what did happen for sure, I know,
it didn't
is
happen.
that Christopher Steele was hired by Fusion GPS, who was paid by the Democratic Party, and his dossier was salacious and unverified to this day, and used to get a warrant and maybe start a counterintelligence investigation. So I want to look at all of it.
Yeah, you look at all of it, Lindsay, because the timeline of Christopher Steele's dossier being the predicate, the reason, the opening salvo to the counterintelligence investigation that James Comey opened in June of 2016 is impossible, because nobody had Steele's dossier until October. So, it just won't work. It won't. But Hillary. Also, can I just tell you, Chris Steele was a private citizen. No, he was not a government agent of anybody's when he was working for Fusion GPS. And may I also point out that Fusion GPS was originally hired by Paul Singer, a GOP operative who runs the conservative Washington Beacon, who also worked with that name from yesterday, Tom Hofeller, the Machiavelli of gerrymandering, okay? The guy who thought up the idea of putting the citizenship question on the census in order to get information about where 18-year-old and older citizens were, so that they would have a tranche of information to use to gerrymander districts and to appropriate money by undercounting all the people in a place, all the people in a state, which is always the way that the census worked. Okay, the way the census works is all the people, all of them are counted. Why are all the people counted? Because all the people are going to get sick. And all the people's children have to go to school. So you count all the people. But anyway, this Paul Singer dude, he is the person who hired Fusion GPS. And they were investigating Donald Trump. They were investigating Hillary Clinton. And then when they couldn't find anything, then when there was no there, and when the email investigation was over, the Democrats decided that they would take that account. Now, it was a law firm that hired Fusion GPS, an American company. And then they subcontracted out to Chris Steele, who was formerly a reliable FBI source for us by virtue of him being one of the Five Eyes, an MI6 officer whose specialty was Russia. Now, if it's the case that you can't hire an American company that subcontracts out to, a citizen of another country, well, then Eric Prince needs to be, drummed out of the business of mercenary work, because that's how he operates. That's what he does. And, sometimes he gets American dollars and he goes and hires Chinese mercenaries. You know what I mean? So anyway, the law is very clear on this. The Trump is so lawless that lawlessness doesn't even register in his brain. In his brain, there's no understanding of legal and illegal. It's just good for Donald Trump or bad for Donald Trump. So he's been asked a few times whether or not he would take political dirt hacked and stolen by foreign adversaries And he said, yeah, would you call I've never called the FBI in my life. No, because they ask questions. Well, they don't have enough agents. That's because you have tasked them with investigating themselves. They're all investigating these bogus charges of spying on you. I mean, this is just, he's a psycho is what it is. But yesterday there was a House Intelligence Committee hearing, and Devin Nunes called some of his favorite people. One of the guys is a former FBI counterintelligence agent who happens to be a devout Republican. His name is Andrew McCarthy. And Nunes thought that he would, like they always have the one guy from the Heritage Foundation at these hearings, right? To say he did nothing wrong, like that. So that's what Andrew McCarthy was there for. And it just didn't work out for Nunes because Andrew McCarthy testified that taking the Trump Tower meeting was problematic, that it exposed the whole Trump campaign to blackmail.
I would just add that I think by taking the meeting, and I don't think you need a lot of training for this, by taking the meeting, you've made yourself beholden to Putin in terms of however he wants to characterize it down the road, so that even if nothing inappropriate happens at the meeting, you have that vulnerability as well.
Didn't work out for you, Devin. Sorry, Nunes. There was a lot of testimony yesterday. Now, Congressman Jim Himes, he went down the road of polling. Now, remember, this was not a one-way street where the Russians said, oh, we want to help Trump, so we're going to steal material. We're going to hack into the DNC. We're going to hack into the DCCC. We're going to hack into the voter registration rolls. We're going to hack in all 50 states, and then we'll give you the dirt. That's the crime here, okay, the interference in our election. And, that's leaving aside the social media effort, okay, that was conducted by the Troll Farm in St. Petersburg that was run by Vladimir Putin's personal chef who was, a billionaire. Right? But it was a two-way street because Manafort, who was also in that Trump Tower meeting and knows what campaign finance law is and knows, and that's why I question, how did Mueller come to the conclusion that because Junior didn't know campaign finance laws, he got a pass? I don't get it. I don't understand the reasoning there. I don't understand what happened there. Somehow I just think Bill Barr has something to do with that Mueller report ending where it did. And when it did, just saying. But Jim Himes, pointed out it's a two-way street, that Manafort's given them polling data.
The Mueller report highlights the counterintelligence risk posed by financial leverage that the Russians may have had over individuals, a variety of individuals close to President Trump, especially Paul Manafort. The report explains that, quote, Manafort had connections to Russia through his prior work for Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska and later through his work for a pro-Russian regime in Ukraine. Manafort stayed in touch with these contacts during the campaign period through Konstantin Kilimnik, a longtime Manafort employee who previously ran Manafort's office in Kiev and who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. We also know from reporting that Manafort owed Deripaska substantial sums of money. Many of Manafort's contacts with Kremlin-aligned actors took place while he was chairman of Donald Trump's campaign. Among other things, Manafort, quote, instructed Rick Gates, his deputy on the campaign and a longtime employee, to provide Kilimnik with updates on the Trump campaign, including internal polling data. It appears that Manafort believed that by sharing confidential campaign information with Deripaska, one of Putin's most loyal oligarchs, he could resolve their, quote, disagreement originating from several lawsuits filed by Deripaska against Manafort.
Settle the debt.
The ranking member's opening comments that the contacts with Russia were ordinary, notwithstanding, and Mr. McCarthy, with due respect to your many decades of service to this country, that is not what campaigns do.
It goes on. I will play you the rest of Jim Himes and the answers that the counterintelligence experts, former FBI counterintelligence experts gave to this polling data scenario, because it was a two-way street, okay? There was collusion. Collusion is a behavior, right? And they were colluding, the Russian intelligence officers and the Trump campaign. Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, Donald Trump Jr., they were colluding. So was Kushner, opening up back channels, trying to go, find ways around the intelligence community so they wouldn't hear what they were doing. They were colluding, but they couldn't. I don't know. Mueller says he can't prove conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt because everyone lied to him. People destroyed documents and used encrypted apps. Plus, it seems to me, his investigation ended rather abruptly.
Mary had a little lamb.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Sharing internal polling data with a hostile foreign power is not what campaigns do. I'm willing to bet you or anybody else my next paycheck that not a single member of the United States Congress, the 535 of us, ever asked our campaign managers to share our internal polling data with a hostile foreign power. So, Mr. Anderson, let me start with you. How could the Kremlin or its intelligence services try to exploit Manafort's longstanding business and personal relationship with Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence and to Deripaska? How could they use that relationship? What counterintelligence risks are posed by such a relationship with a presidential campaign?
Well, there's a lot, sir. One, obviously, they would exploit, if they did have financial leverage on that individual, they would exploit every aspect of that. The one thing I will tell you about Russian intelligence services is if you read a book from 1940, they're the same. They are a in-your-face, not a very polite bunch of people that will use any means possible once they've locked on into an individual that they deem necessary to get to whatever end they're going after. So not only would they exploit financial information from Mr. Manafort or anybody else that they could, but they would also use that then to look at individuals around those financial transactions.
Hello.
So in other words, not only going directly at Mr. Manafort, but potentially going at individuals around those financial transactions that if for some reason that did not work against him, they would look at other avenues to get towards that.
Thank you. Ms. Douglas, let me ask you a variant of that question. How could Russia's knowledge of Manafort's illicit dealings, for which he is now a tenant of the United States government, which stem from his work with pro-Kremlin parties in Ukraine, be useful as compromat or compromising material as the Russian government undertook a covert influence effort directed at the U.S. public? How could the Russians use what they knew about Paul Manafort to their advantage?
Well, I think they did it very effectively. And one of the ways they did it that it's immediately apparent is they actually tasked him. And that's one of the initial tests when you are developing an asset for intelligence collection.
Can you elaborate on that? You just said that the Russians tasked the campaign chairman of Donald Trump's campaign. Can you just elaborate on how the Russians tasked him?
They asked him to provide polling data. And like you said, I mean, polling data isn't the keys to the kingdom, right? But it is a small step that illustrates his willingness to provide information to someone he knows he's beholden to financially, right? An ongoing lawsuit, fees that are owed, and he is willing to provide internal campaign information to a foreign government and to a person who was closely tied to the Kremlin. And I think that is a great illustration of how the Russians work.
Okay, so that was a Intelligence Committee hearing yesterday where they spoke to former FBI counterintelligence agents and asked questions about the polling data. Now, I disagree with Stephanie there. The keys to the kingdom may not be the polling data, but it is if you are launching a media plan. It is if you're looking for people who can have who could be suppressed. If you're looking to denigrate the opponent of the candidate you prefer by attacking the candidate that you don't prefer to her voters, by saying she's sick, by saying she's going to die, by saying she's running a pedophile ring out of a pizza parlor, these kinds of things, by saying she hates black people, that she referred to young kids as predators, young black men as predators back in the 90s when she was campaigning for her husband's crime bill, right? So the keys to the kingdom, no, but a media plan, a roadmap to districts that can be suppressed or flipped by less than 1 percentage point, like Wisconsin, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, like Minnesota. Those places Donald Trump won with less than 1% of the vote. We're talking about like a state of 22,000 votes, okay? So I just wanted to get that out on the record that, it is a great illustration of how they worked and how it was a two-way street, and that they did task Paul Manafort with doing something. Now, Oleg Deripaska, as you'll remember, was suing Paul Manafort for millions of dollars. Why? What was the basis of that lawsuit? Well, it was that Deripaska had paid Paul Manafort about $10 million, and Paul Manafort had agreed to provide Oleg Deripaska with a media plan so that Russia could pick a president. They wanted a media plan. And Deripaska was suing Manafort for non-performance of that contract in the Cayman Islands. That's why polling data. That's why Manafort. He was totally indebted to Oleg Deripaska. And in fact, we know, and we've known for a really long time, that one of the first emails was, now I'm the campaign manager. How do I use this to make me whole? Which means I don't owe you anything. And it was all going through Konstantin Kalemnik, his assistant back in Ukraine. And Kalemnik was transferring these messages to Oleg Deripaska, one of Putin's favorite oligarchs. I mean, the difference between, first of all, I have to say, the dirt on political opponent. Oh, anybody would take that information. Anybody. And, I'm trust me, everybody in Congress does it. Everyone in Congress. Nobody does that. Nobody takes stolen, hacked material from a foreign government that clearly stole the material and then releases it through Julian Assange's WikiLeaks. Nobody does that. It's never been done. Because they don't do it because it's illegal. And a campaign manager and a George Papadopoulos and a Michael Flynn and a Junior and a Michael Cohen, all with financial interests in Russia, with Russians on the line, were cultivated. The president, we still don't know the answer because we don't know where this counterintelligence report is. I don't know if the FBI is still working on it, if it's completed. This is something Adam Schiff wants to know in the House. He's the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he has no freaking idea. That's why today he's saying, maybe I'll subpoena Chris Wray because I need to know where the counterintelligence investigation is. And the difference between the counterintelligence investigation and the criminal investigation is the counterintelligence investigation asks a different question. It asks whether or not anybody, including the president of the United States, his sons, whether or not his former campaign manager, whether or not his former national security advisor, whether these people were compromised by the Russian military intelligence units, whether or not they were compromised. The criminal investigation asks the question, did anybody in the Trump campaign commit conspiracy to defraud the United States? See, and that's Mueller's arena. Now, it seems to me that Mueller had asked for another 6 months for the grand jury to continue its work, and then a few days later, he suddenly comes out and says, I'm done, I'm closing my office. I don't understand why a man who took bullets in Vietnam is afraid to testify in public. He owes this to the American people. You do not investigate the president for 2 years and then get a different attorney general who is clearly the president's attorney and not the attorney for the United States, telling you to close shop and stay quiet about it.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The Trump Tower meeting, or any of the improper contexts that we now know were part of this effort by the Russian intelligence services. My point is, sir, if the Trump campaign had simply picked up the phone and called the FBI and said, "We're worried about this," it would have gone a long way to inoculating them against the concern that they were working in concert with a foreign intelligence operation.
I couldn't agree more with that, and I think anybody who thinks that they've been approached by a Russian asset should notify the FBI.
Andrew McCarthy, the Republican, called by Devin Nunes, questioned by Devin Nunes, and questioned by Democrats as well, all agree that the president should have called the FBI and that Junior should have called, he obviously called his father. You think that meeting at Trump Tower with all the principals from the Trump campaign present in that room happened without Donald Trump knowing that they were meeting with, his hosts from the Crocus group that hosted the Miss USA pageant in Moscow? You think that happened, right? Yeah. That's what the maggots have to believe, the cult 45 members. They have to believe that Junior did this all on his own, and that Jared showed up, and Manafort showed up, and Flynn showed up, and Rinat Akhmetshin from Crocus, and Natalia Veselnitskaya, the Russian, a lawyer for Vladimir Putin, that they also, and Trump didn't know anything about it. Oh, please spare me and why, the idea, this is what he's tweeting this morning. This was just bizarro world. So he's trying to downplay his remarks this morning. He says he talks to all kinds of foreign officials, like the Queen of England and the Prince of Wales. First of all, he spells whale, W-H-A-L-E, like orcas, okay? Like humpbacks, right? Wales. No, Wales is a place, Mr. President, and it's W-A-L-E-S. Okay, the man can't spell. We get it. Did the Prince of Orcas troll or hack us? Can you see the difference? Okay, maggots, can you see the difference? Did the Queen of England troll or hack us? Did they hack into Hillary Clinton's email? Let's see. Did Hillary Clinton stand on a stage and say, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find," and then 5 hours later have the Queen of England or the Prince of Wales hack into her personal email? Did that happen? No. And that's why it's so unusual, okay? Because this crap does not happen. But Donald Trump, Junior, not only was it a two-way street with, providing them with internal polling data so that they could target people for suppression and all this stuff, but he writes back. And of course, it's an enthusiastic, well, if it is what you say it is, I love it. Yeah, because that's what happens, right? That's what happens. And Trump, by the way, is the only president of the United States in modern times that's ever met in the Oval Office with Russians after they fired the FBI director and no Americans present at all to tell the Russians, "I fired Comey, and being the stable genius that I am, I have concluded that is the end of the Russia investigation." What? That was the beginning of the criminal investigation into obstruction. And just so you know how to watch this, the Intel Committee, the Intelligence Committee, which I've been playing clips from, because the freaking cable networks will not show you these hearings. I have no earthly idea why they're doing this. I have no earthly idea why they won't connect the dots for you about 2017 when Trump said, everybody does it. And yeah, I would do it again. And yesterday when he told George Stephanopoulos, yeah, everybody does it. And I would do it again, which means he's doing it now. Do you understand? This 2020 election is going to be a doozy, man. It can't be close. It cannot be within 1% in any state, because they will flip it. And that's that's just a fact. And the conversation can't be hijacked by Russia or China or Iran in this case, which I feel is coming. I do. I really feel like they're going to start a war in Iran. And as little truth as there is to be had now, you know what the first casualty of war is, right? It's the truth. So prepared to be hurled into darkness, everybody, if that happens. But just so you know, the Intelligence Committee is looking at the interference and the compromise. The Judiciary Committee is looking at obstruction. So basically, the Intel Committee is looking at Volume 1 of the Mueller report, and the Judiciary Committee is looking at Volume 2. One is looking at interference in the election, collusion, conspiracy to defraud. That would be Intel. And they're doing it so that they can protect us from what's obviously still going on. And from a president who said, I'll do it again.
What I find so striking about this is he went to such trouble to deceive the country about that Trump Tower meeting. He dictated that false statement about adoptions to mislead people. So if this was so perfectly okay as he would have us believe, then why did he go to such trouble to deceive the country about that meeting? I think what the president is really saying is, yeah, I knew this was unethical and maybe illegal, and I would do it again.
Right.
Plainly, I think we were going to have to spell it out crystal clear in the law that getting dirt from a foreign power is considered a prohibited foreign contribution to a campaign. We could call it the Donald Trump Act if we need any further clarity. But plainly, he hasn't learned the lesson. Rudy Giuliani is going off to Ukraine, or was going to go off to Ukraine, to see if they could drum up some more dirt on one of the president's opponents. Giuliani certainly, as the president's lawyer, hasn't learned a thing. Jared Kushner also wouldn't commit to notifying the FBI if he was contacted in this way. They plainly have learned nothing from these 2.5 years of our exploration of this and of all the public censure around this.
They've learned nothing except how to get away with it, and that obstruction works, right? And so their story went from there were no contacts to so what there were contacts to Rudy Giuliani saying there's nothing wrong with receiving stolen, hacked material from the DNC that was disseminated on WikiLeaks for the benefit of Donald Trump, and there's nothing wrong with being enthusiastic about receiving hacked materials from a foreign adversary. And we know Russia is a foreign adversary because the intelligence community keeps on telling you that they're still doing this. They're still hacking us. They still have an interest in what goes on here in America.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
You read then for about all the context that took place coming over from the Russian side. At any of those points, sir, putting yourself in the place of those who received those contacts, at any of those points, would you have called the FBI?
Well, I would. Would I have called the FBI?
Yes.
I call the FBI for things probably a lot less serious than that, I imagine. But
thank you.
Yeah, I do think.
However else you feel about the report, do you think someone should have called the FBI?
Yes.
That was the Republican witness that was programmed in by the Republican ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes. And the Republican ended up agreeing with the Democrat. Yes, you should call the FBI. Of course you should call the FBI. The FBI needs to know that a foreign adversary is hacking into the DNC, and you know it, and your campaign knows it, and that you're coordinating with them not only on giving them internal polling data, but that you're also coordinating the dumping of the documents through WikiLeaks. By the way, the extradition order was signed off on today by the British Foreign Secretary. Julian Assange is probably going to be coming to America, everybody, next year. He's still serving, almost a year for skipping bail and hiding out in the embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy all these years. So after he does his year, they say he's in very poor health, very, very poor health, 47 years old, and he can hardly appear. He just, So that's happening. Hope Hicks is going to testify next Wednesday. We'll probably have the transcript on Thursday. It's just, and they went, this campaign is so off the rails. They went from, we had no contacts with Russians, to, well, my son had some contacts with some Russians, to, there's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians.
There's nothing wrong with taking information from Russians. There's nothing wrong with taking information. Depends on where it came from.
It was hacked and stolen.
You're assuming that the giving of information is a campaign contribution.
Yes.
You read the report carefully. The report says we can't conclude that because the law is pretty much against that.
No.
Do people get information from this person, that person?
So you would have accepted information from Russians against a client, against a candidate if you were running in the presidential election?
I probably wouldn't. I wasn't asked. I would have advised, just out of excess of caution, don't do it.
Googly eyes, Giuliani. His hands are dirty. You understand that. And that goes way back to the New York field office, the FBI field office, when they got Anthony Weiner's computer and sat on it. And Giuliani and James Kallstrom were on Fox News, Fox News has no problem with anything the president did. They have no problem with, trolling and hacking into they have no problem with foreign governments hacking into the United States. They have no problem with it. It's totally fine with them. It's not a security issue. And oh, hell no, you shouldn't call the FBI. Why would you call the FBI?
So what's interesting, he goes on to say, he said, you know what, you should call the FBI if you know something on your opponent. And he said, give me a break, George. He said, life doesn't work that way. He said, in all of my experience and everything that I have ever learned, all the information I have learned over the course of my life, I've never once picked up the phone and called the FBI. And he says, they don't even have enough agents. Could you imagine, though, what do you say? Hi, I'm running for Congress, and Norway called, and they have some information on my opponent. What's the FBI going to do? You think they're going to be like, oh, we're right on it. We're going to investigate that.
Yeah.
Probably
Norway?
Not.
Actually, I think...
Right. You're crazy. We'll call you back.
Their understanding of counterintelligence operations, or the FBI's role in counterintelligence operations, or the Department of Homeland Security cybersecurity operations, which Donald Trump has dismantled, okay? He took apart, and it doesn't exist anymore, the Department of Homeland Security cybersecurity office, right? But their lack of understanding and their peddling of this garbage to people who tune into that, thinking that they're getting real information, is so crazy and damaging and pathetic and horrible. What we're talking about here is stolen information. You call the FBI and you say, I'm running for Congress, and I found out that Russia hacked into and stole our campaign's strategy. And somebody on our campaign gave the Russians in return our internal polling data. Yes, they're going to show up. I mean, what's wrong with you? What is wrong? You think that if you called the FBI counterintelligence and you said that a foreign adversary was hacking into the United States, and you were an officer of the United States, you were either running for the presidency, or you were running for Congress, or you're a member of you think that they would say you're crazy and hang up on you? What's wrong? Now, they don't even have enough agents. That's not true. But if it is true, it's because the president has tasked them with investigating themselves. This is a very twisted, chaotic presidency. And there is a reason. There's a method behind the madness, okay? And the method is that in chaos, Donald Trump can steal and rig and cause all kinds of, declare emergency powers unto himself, appropriate money, which the president cannot do constitutionally. I mean, all this crap that he's doing, selling weapons to the Saudis, something that even the Republicans don't want. And then all of a sudden today, I don't know, oil prices, spike because there's an attack on a Norwegian vessel chartered by Taiwan and a Japanese cargo vessel, and Mike Pompeo stands in front of the American people without any evidence, taking no questions, saying Iran did it. And this is hours after the Saudi airport was attacked and 26 people in the arrivals hallway were wounded in Yemen, at the Saudi airport in Yemen. Hours later, our ships are, they got these magnetic, bombs attached to the hull. I mean, this is so twisted. This is so unbelievable. But yet, he did it to help the president change the subject from the president's criminality. I mean, Pompeo, this guy is a freaking congressman from Kansas. Ted in Dallas.
Hey, Randy.
Hey.
First time, long time.
Oh, my favorite kind.
You were just talking earlier about how the truth kind of disappears in all of this chaos.
The fog of war.
It reminded me of what Harry Reid said to give him fake briefings.
Give him fake briefings.
What does that even mean?
It means they'll tell him stuff. He won't know the difference.
And now I almost feel like it's an extension of that, like trading places. Like we need to intercept the farm report that's going back and forth between the Russians,
frozen orange juice, baby,
and Donald Trump, and somehow pollute whatever intel they have. I don't know how to do that, but I feel like that's where we're at to level the playing field.
Well, the way that you do that is you cherry pick the intelligence, and you choose to go only to intelligence agents who will interpret the same facts that that somebody else won't. To say that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. And then, and then you send your Secretary of State to the UN to hold up a little vial of baby powder, and you say it's anthrax. And next thing you know, 17 years later, we're still there.
Commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience. Visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today. This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
If a foreign government offers assistance to a political campaign, opposition research, stolen information, social media campaign, or otherwise, what would you as director of the FBI, if you discovered it, ask that campaign to do?
Well, Senator, as I think I said even back to my confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
That's why I asked the question.
When Senator Graham asked me a similar question then, I think my view is that if any public official or member of any campaign is contacted by any nation state or anybody acting on behalf of a nation state about influencing or interfering with our election, then that's something that the FBI would want to know about.
And if they did not make it such things available to the FBI and you found out about later, would that trouble you?
Tell us information promptly so that we can take appropriate steps to protect the American people.
And then your fascist president says,
this is somebody that said, we have information on your opponent. Oh, let me call the FBI. Give me a break. Life doesn't work that way.
The FBI director says that's what should happen.
The FBI director is wrong.
Yes, because Trump is a legitimate crime fighter. Yeah, he understands counterintelligence. The president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, he's better at being a general than the generals are. He knows more about, wind turbines and how they kill birds than climate scientists. He knows about weather more than meteorologists do. He knows weather is climate. He knows about drones. Nobody knows more about drones. Nobody knows more about counterintelligence. Nobody knows more about war. I know more than the generals do. This is a sick man, a sick, twisted man who views the world this way. Is it good for me? or is it bad for me? He couldn't care less about you. He couldn't care less about this country. He is that scene that, you know who he is? He's Ned Beatty in Network. Okay, Network was such a good movie in 1976. It was supposed to be a comedy. Okay, it's about how when corporations take over the news, what it's going to look like. Okay, and Ned Beatty has this conference room scene with, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, Howard Beale, the newscaster. It's worth it just for that scene. That's why it's a Broadway show now, starring Bryan Cranston of Breaking Bad fame, who won the Tony Award the other night. That is such a valuable movie. You need to see that scene. Just Google it. Google Ned Beatty Network conference room scene and watch it. That's who Donald Trump is. That's who Donald Trump is. He is that demagogue. He is that man that can convince you to buy anything. Anything. And that's how it starts, that scene. Ned Beatty says, you know, Mr. Beale, I've been a salesman all my life, and some people say that I can sell anybody anything. Well, I'd like to try and sell you something. And he sells Howard Beale, the newscaster, on the idea that there are no peoples, there are no democracies. There is only one giant corporate enterprise, and that the world is a corporation. It's sick, but it's happening. Patrick in Maryland.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm a military veteran. I was born just after World War II, and I'm wondering what our troops were fighting for on D-Day. I never believed that in my lifetime, 75 years later, we'd have a fascist dictator in the White House. We'd have a attorney general who doesn't believe in the rule of law, and Mitch McConnell, who doesn't believe in the democratic process. I am really disappointed with Nancy Pelosi. Our democracy is hanging by a thread. Trump is threading our Constitution, and the Congress is the only place that we can turn to, and she is letting us down.
So obviously the Axis has invaded, and with the Axis help, we have a president of the United States who was chosen by them to be the fascist within. As I've said a million times, America will never be destroyed from without because of guys like you, guys like my dad and me, all serving. Right. But as far as Nancy goes, tell me something. Who is she going to call? The president of the United States is forbidding. I mean, you have to take him to court. The president of the United States.
Well, that's why we need
is not allowing anybody to testify.
Well, that's why we need a impeachment.
What magical
inquiry.
power? Well, what magical power?
Well, I don't say there's.
No. Let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So what magical power does calling something an impeachment inquiry give to get people like Mueller, to get people like McGahn, to get people like Flynn, to get people like Hope Hicks to testify in public, to educate the American people? I mean,
well, it would be expedited in the court.
Yeah, well, you know.
And we could get the grand jury testimony. We need to have it on TV.
The grand jury testimony has to be requested by Gerald Nadler, and that they had a vote. Well, they had a vote the other day to give him that authorization to go to the court. So that part of it's done, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, he hasn't gone yet, but yeah, I would hope that they would listen to him. He could have gone with Barr, but Barr refuses. It would have been much easier.
Exactly, because Barr is not representing the people, and he's not representing our right to know who our president is and why he teams up with and defends trolls and hackers and people who break into the Democratic National Committee. Oh, everything old is new again.
Well, there's so many in the administration that need to be impeached because they're acting on his behalf and not the American people.
Well, I agree with you, but if you look at the 28 subpoenas that are out, I mean, each and every one of them have to be litigated, and that is the problem. It's messy and it's slow.
Yeah, but I think that listening to the different lawyers who are
well, that's the thing.
They're in Watergate. They got the information much faster.
Well,
and Yeah, when
well, they
an
didn't.
inquiry.
They didn't. I mean, Watergate, the Watergate, actually, the start of the Watergate inquiry, it took a year to get it started, and then it took.
I watched those proceedings.
Right, and it went on
gavel.
for an entire year, right?
Yeah.
And also, remember this: the Democrats had the House and the Senate, so it wasn't as if they were gonna, impeach Nixon, and Nixon wouldn't believe that the Senate would remove him because you had.
Well, I'm not even expecting that it would ever be referred to the Senate for
right.
trial.
Of course it'll be referred.
Get it on the record, have those witnesses appear on TV,
but that's
not behind
the thing,
closed
Patrick,
doors.
But that's right, and I'm against the closed door thing too, because the point of getting Mueller to testify, the point of getting people to testify, is to educate the American people who don't have time to read 448 pages of legalese, right? So
I agree with you.
Okay, so how do we get that to happen?
Well, I'm a fan of inherent contempt.
Me too.
Lock one person up, and they'll all fall in line.
You're right, and that's where I'm going with you. That's exactly where I'm going with you.
Yeah, we're of like mind then.
Yes.
Well, I want to let somebody else call in.
Right,
I don't want to
you.
take up all your time, but I appreciate you speaking with me. Thank you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you very much. I just wanted to know who I was talking to. Inherent contempt is the answer. Why? Because civil contempt, go to court. Court adjudicates, a fine. So it's never been done before. So whoever loses appeals. Then you got to wait for the appeals court. Whoever loses there goes to the Supreme Court. You know how long that's going to take? Do you have any idea? No, that's no good. Same with criminal. Court, appeal, Supreme. No, inherent contempt. That's the answer to our problem. Why? Because that says that the House of Representatives itself can start a trial and bring witnesses, cross-examine them, and hold them in contempt all by themselves. You don't need the Senate. You don't need the Senate for nothing. I get why. I just want to put this out there. I get why Nancy Pelosi wants the court involved. I get it. It's because they don't want to seem like the only branch of government, half of the legislature, which is what they are. They're half of the legislature, and they don't want to seem like this is a vendetta against Donald Trump. And they know how good Donald Trump is at spinning, and that they've got this massive propaganda machine out there known as Fox News and all the talk radio stations, which is kind of why I agreed to go back on terrestrial radio, which we will do on Monday. We're going to be on in Minnesota, too. So Minnesota, San Francisco, we'll start broadcasting on terrestrial because these people, thousands and thousands of hours of convincing you not to believe your own eyes and ears. It's, so I'll throw myself back into that arena as much as, I can. But honestly, she's doing it because she needs another branch of government to adjudicate as well. She needs another branch of government, a non-political branch of government, to get involved. That's why.